The floorboards creaked ominously as Sarah crept down the darkened hallway, every sense on high alert. Flickering shadows danced across the walls. Was that movement up ahead? Her heart pounded in her ears, drowning out the eerie silence that blanketed the neighborhood. Gripping the crowbar tightly, she edged towards the living room, straining to catch even the slightest sound. Suddenly, a faint groan reached her ears. Spinning around, she raised the crowbar, bracing for the attack. But the shambling figure that emerged from the shadows was no mindless zombie. It was her neighbor, Mrs. Wilkins, staring at her with lifeless eyes. "Sarah," the old woman croaked, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're coming." Before Sarah could react, a chorus of unearthly howls erupted outside, followed by the sickening crunch of breaking glass. Whirling around, she watched in horror as a horde of the undead surged through the shattered windows, their gnarled claws grasping for her. Asterisk, this is it, asterisk, she thought, her mind racing. Asterisk-ing trapped asterisk. Desperately, she scanned the room for an escape route, but the zombies were closing in fast. Clutching the crowbar, she steeled herself for a final, futile stand. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the room, and one of the zombies collapsed mid-lunge, a bullet hole in its forehead. Sarah's head snapped towards the source of the gunshot, and her eyes widened in shock. There, silhouetted in the doorway, stood her neighbor, Mr. Wilkins, a smoking revolver in his hand. "Get down," he barked, and without hesitation, Sarah dropped to the floor as he unleashed a hail of bullets, each one finding its mark with deadly precision. The zombies fell one by one, their grotesque forms crumpling to the ground. When the last one had been dispatched, a deafening silence settled over the room. Slowly, Sarah rose to her feet, her gaze locked on the man who had saved her life. "Mr. Wilkins, how did you?" He raised a hand, cutting her off. "There's no time to explain. We need to get out of here now." His eyes narrowed, and he cast a wary glance towards the shattered windows. They won't be the only ones coming. Sarah opened her mouth to ask what he meant, but the sound of a car engine roaring to life outside made her pause. Exchanging a quick look with Mr. Wilkins, they hurried to the front door, only to find their path blocked by a dark SUV that had pulled up in the driveway. The tinted window rolled down, revealing the cold, calculating gaze of their HOA president, Mrs. Blackwood. "Well, well, well," she purred, a malicious smile spreading across her face. "Look who's trying to escape." Sarah's blood ran cold. Asterisk, how did she know? Asterisk, she glanced at Mr. Wilkins, who had positioned himself in front of her, shielding her with his body. "You're not going anywhere," Mrs. Blackwood declared, her voice laced with a chilling authority. "Not until you've answered for your transgressions." She emphasized the last word, dripping with disdain. Clutching the crowbar tighter, Sarah braced herself for the confrontation to come. Whatever happened next, she knew one thing for certain. The battle for her freedom had only just begun. Asterisk, the stage is set for a high-stakes power struggle between Sarah, the determined homeowner, and the corrupt HOA leadership. Tension, suspense, and unexpected twists are guaranteed as the fight for survival and justice unfolds. The cinematic storytelling and smooth AI voice-over delivery will captivate the audience, leaving them on the edge of their seats, eager to discover what happens next. Asterisk. Sarah's heart raced as she stared down the barrel of Mrs. Blackwood's gun, the HOA president's cold eyes boring into her. Mr. Wilkins stood protectively in front of her, his own weapon raised, the two neighbors engaged in a tense standoff with their tyrannical HOA leader. "What do you want, Blackwood?" Mr. Wilkins demanded, his voice steady but laced with barely contained fury. The HOA president's lips curled into a cruel smile. "I think you know exactly what I want, Mr. Wilkins." She shifted her gaze to Sarah, her expression hardening. "The two of you have been causing quite a bit of trouble for our little community." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She knew the defiance of the HOA's draconian rules had not gone unnoticed, but she had never imagined they would be targeted like this. Asterisk zombies and power-hungry HOA presidents. What a nightmare, asterisk. We've done nothing wrong, she spoke up, her voice surprisingly firm. You're the one breaking the law, not us. Mrs. Blackwood let out a cold, humorless laugh. Oh, my dear Sarah, you're sadly mistaken. In this neighborhood, I make the rules. Her finger tightened on the trigger, and Sarah braced herself for the shot. But before Mrs. Blackwood could fire, a sudden commotion from behind the SUV drew her attention. Whipping her head around, she cursed under her breath as a mob of angry homeowners surged towards the vehicle, their shouts and demands echoing through the eerily silent street. What is the meaning of this? The HOA president hissed, her composure momentarily shaken. Mr. Wilkins seized the opportunity, grabbing Sarah's arm and yanking her towards the side of the house. Come on, we need to get out of here, he yelled, darting between the shadows. Sarah stumbled after him, her mind racing. Asterisk, where are we going? What's happening? Asterisk, she glanced back to see Mrs. Blackwood barking orders at her goons, the homeowners' cries growing louder and more insistent. As they rounded the corner, Mr. Wilkins led her to a small shed, its padlock hanging open. Inside, quickly, he commanded, ushering her through the door. Once they were safely inside, Sarah turned to her neighbor, questions burning on her lips. Mr. Wilkins, what's going on? How did you know those zombies were coming? The older man's expression was grave. I'm afraid the situation is much more complex than you realize, Sarah. The HOA's corruption runs deeper than you can imagine. He paused, his gaze darkening. Those things out there, they're not just mindless zombies. They're part of Blackwood's twisted scheme to maintain control over this neighborhood. Sarah's eyes widened in horror. You mean the HOA is responsible for this? Mr. Wilkins nodded solemnly. Yes, and they'll stop at nothing to keep their dirty little secrets hidden. He leaned in closer, his voice barely above a whisper. That's why we need to get out of here, before they find us. As if on cue, the sound of approaching footsteps reached their ears, and Sarah felt her heart leap into her throat. Mr. Wilkins gestured for her to be quiet, his grip tightening on his revolver. The door creaked open, and a figure stepped inside, the dim light casting an eerie glow on their face. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the intruder. Asterisk, Mrs. Wilkins, asterisk. The old woman's eyes were hollow, her movements jerky and unnatural. She let out a low, guttural growl, her gaze fixed on Sarah and Mr. Wilkins. She's one of them, Sarah whispered, horror etched on her face. Mr. Wilkins nodded grimly. I'm sorry, Sarah, but we're going to have to fight our way out of this. As Mrs. Wilkins lunged towards them, the sound of gunfire erupted outside, the startled cries of the homeowners mingling with the unearthly shrieks of the undead. Sarah braced herself, praying that they could somehow survive this nightmare. Asterisk, the tension escalates as Sarah and Mr. Wilkins find themselves trapped, surrounded by both the corrupted HOA and the terrifying zombies they've unleashed. With the homeowners in open revolt and the threat of the undead closing in, the stakes have never been higher. The cinematic storytelling and smooth AI narration will keep the audience on the edge of their seats, eager to see how Sarah and her neighbor will overcome these seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Asterisk. The air crackled with the sound of gunfire as Sarah and Mr. Wilkins ducked for cover, the shambling form of Mrs. Wilkins advancing towards them. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing to find a way out of this dire situation. Gripping the crowbar tightly, she glanced at Mr. Wilkins, who was already lining up his shot. We need to get out of here, now, he said, his voice low and urgent. Sarah nodded, her gaze darting around the cramped shed, searching for a possible escape route. The sound of breaking glass and panicked screams from outside only added to the growing sense of dread. Suddenly, an idea struck her. "The back door," she whispered, pointing to the partially obscured exit. "If we can make it there, we might be able to slip away." Mr. Wilkins spared a quick glance towards the door, his brow furrowed in concentration. "It's risky, but it's our best chance." He turned to Sarah, his expression grim. "On my signal, we make a run for it, understand?" Sarah nodded, her grip tightening on the crowbar as she steeled herself for the dash to freedom. Mrs. Wilkins was closing in, her lifeless eyes fixed on them with a single-minded purpose. "Now!" Mr. Wilkins barked, and the two of them burst into motion, darting towards the back door. Sarah could feel the weight of Mrs. Wilkins' gaze on them, and she knew that the slightest misstep could prove fatal. They burst through the doorway and into the backyard, the sounds of chaos echoing all around them. Sarah risked a glance over her shoulder, her heart sinking as she saw the shambling figure of Mrs. Wilkins emerging from the shed, her bony fingers reaching for them. "This way!" Mr. Wilkins shouted, leading her towards a gap in the fence. They scrambled through the narrow opening, emerging onto a dimly lit alley. The sound of sirens and shouting filled the air, but Sarah didn't dare pause to investigate. "We need to keep moving," Mr. Wilkins said, his voice strained. "They'll be searching for us." Sarah nodded, her lungs burning as they hurried down the alley, the shadows enveloping them. The air was thick with an ominous silence, broken only by the occasional crackle of distant gunfire. As they turned a corner, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Looming before them was a massive, ominous-looking building, the HOA headquarters. "We can't go that way," she whispered, her heart sinking. "They'll be crawling all over the place." Mr. Wilkins paused, his brow furrowed in concentration. "We'll have to find another way around." He glanced over his shoulder, his expression darkening, "and we need to do it quickly." They continued down the alley, the eerie silence closing in around them. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, her senses on high alert for any sign of danger. Suddenly, a movement in the shadows caught her eye, and she stiffened, her grip tightening on the crowbar. Mr. Wilkins raised his gun, his finger poised on the trigger. But the figure that emerged from the darkness was not a zombie or a member of the HOA. It was a young man, his face etched with a mix of fear and determination. "Hey, you two!" He called out, his voice barely above a whisper. "I saw what happened back there. You're in trouble, aren't you?" Sarah glanced at Mr. Wilkins, unsure of how to respond. The man stepped closer, his eyes darting around nervously. "Look, I know a way out of this mess," he said, his gaze fixing on Sarah. "If you're willing to trust me, that is." Sarah hesitated, her mind racing. Could they really afford to trust a stranger in the midst of this nightmare? But as the sound of approaching footsteps reached her ears, she knew they had no other choice. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "Lead the way." The tension continues to build as Sarah and Mr. Wilkins narrowly escape the corrupted HOA and the undead threat, only to find themselves facing a new challenge. A mysterious stranger who claims to have a way out. With the HOA closing in and the undead horde still lurking in the shadows, the stakes have never been higher. The cinematic storytelling and smooth AI narration will keep the audience engrossed, eager to see how Sarah and her allies will navigate this treacherous situation. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she followed the stranger down the dimly lit alley, Mr. Wilkins close behind. The sound of distant gunfire and the eerie silence that hung over the neighborhood only heightened the sense of unease that had settled over them. "Where are you taking us?" Mr. Wilkins asked, his voice low and guarded. The stranger glanced over his shoulder, his expression tense. "There's a safe house a few blocks from here," he replied. "It's owned by some people who've been fighting against the HOA's corruption for years." Sarah felt a spark of hope flare within her. Cold, this be the break they've been looking for. But a seed of doubt still lingered, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being led into a trap. "How do we know we can trust you?" she asked, her grip tightening on the crowbar. The stranger paused, his gaze meeting hers. "Look, I know you have no reason to believe me, but right now, you don't have a lot of options." He glanced around nervously, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The HOA and those things, they're closing in. This is your best chance to get out of this alive." Sarah exchanged a look with Mr. Wilkins, the unspoken question hanging between them. Go. We take the risk, asterisk. After a moment, Mr. Wilkins nodded, his expression grim. "Lead the way," he said, his voice resigned. The stranger nodded, turning and hurrying down the alley. Sarah and Mr. Wilkins followed, their senses on high alert for any sign of danger. As they rounded a corner, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Looming before them was a towering, dilapidated warehouse, its windows boarded up and the air around it thick with an eerie stillness. "Here we are," the stranger said, his voice barely above a whisper. He glanced around nervously before stepping up to a rusted metal door, rapping out a rhythmic pattern. After a moment, the door creaked open, and a pair of wary eyes peered out. "Who goes there?" a gruff voice demanded. "It's me, Tyson," the stranger replied. "I've got 2 people who need shelter." The eyes narrowed, then the door swung open, revealing a burly, heavily armed man. He nodded curtly at Tyson, then turned his gaze to Sarah and Mr. Wilkins. "You 2 better come inside, quick," he growled, ushering them through the doorway. Once they were safely inside, the man closed and bolted the door, his gaze sweeping over them with a critical eye. "Welcome to the Resistance," he said, his voice rough but tinged with a hint of pride. "I'm Jared, the head of security here." Sarah felt a surge of relief, but she couldn't help but feel a twinge of skepticism. Asterisk the Resistance. Asterisk, she thought, her brow furrowing. Asterisk, what exactly are we getting ourselves into, asterisk? Jared seemed to sense her unease, and he offered her a wry smile. "I know, it's a lot to take in, but trust me, you're safer here than out there." He jerked his thumb towards the door, his expression darkening. "The HOA and their pet zombies have been hunting us for months." Sarah's eyes widened, and she glanced at Mr. Wilkins, who was listening intently. "So it's true then?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The HOA really is behind all of this?" Jared nodded grimly. "Yeah, and they'll stop at nothing to keep their dirty little secrets buried." He motioned for them to follow him, leading them deeper into the dimly lit warehouse. As they walked, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they had just leaped from the frying pan and into the fire. Asterisk, what have we gotten ourselves into? Asterisk, she wondered, her heart heavy with uncertainty. But as they rounded a corner and caught sight of the group of determined-looking individuals gathered around a makeshift command center, she knew that there was no turning back. Asterisk, if they really are fighting against the HOA, then maybe, just maybe, they have a chance, asterisk. Asterisk, the stakes continue to rise as Sarah and Mr. Wilkins find themselves thrust into the midst of a resistance movement against the corrupt HOA and their sinister zombie plot. With the threat of the undead and the relentless pursuit of the HOA closing in, the characters must navigate this dangerous and unpredictable situation, unsure of who they can truly trust. The cinematic storytelling and smooth AI narration will keep the audience captivated, eagerly awaiting the next twist and turn in this high-stakes power struggle asterisk. As Sarah and Mr. Wilkins followed Jared deeper into the Resistance's makeshift headquarters, the air was thick with a palpable sense of tension and determination. Scattered around the dimly lit warehouse, a group of hardened individuals huddled over maps and tactical gear, their expressions grim and resolute. "Welcome to the command center," Jared said, gesturing towards the bustling activity. "This is where we coordinate our efforts to take down the HOA and their undead puppets." Sarah's eyes widened as she took in the scene, her mind racing with 1,000 questions. Asterisk undead puppets. Just how deep does this conspiracy go? Asterisk. Sensing her unease, Jared offered her a reassuring nod. I know it's a lot to take in, but you're safe here. We've been fighting this fight for a long time, and we're not about to give up now. Mr. Wilkins stepped forward, his gaze fixed on Jared. So, what's the plan? He asked, his voice gruff but tinged with a hint of hope. Jared's expression darkened. The plan is to take down the HOA once and for all. We've been gathering intel, building up our resources, and waiting for the right moment to strike. He paused, his eyes narrowing. And with you two joining our cause, we might just have the edge we need. Sarah felt a surge of unease. Asterisk joining their cause. Asterisk, she glanced at Mr. Wilkins, silently pleading for his guidance. The older man seemed to sense her hesitation, and he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We're in, he said, his voice resolute. Whatever it takes to stop the HOA and their twisted schemes. Jared nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Good. We're going to need everyone we can get. He gestured towards a nearby table, where a large map of the neighborhood was spread out. Our intel indicates that the HOA's headquarters is the key to their entire operation. If we can take that down, we can cripple their control over the community. Sarah leaned in, studying the map intently. The HOA headquarters loomed large, surrounded by a network of secure access points and heavily fortified defenses. Asterisk, this is going to be no easy task, asterisk, she thought, her brow furrowing. What about the zombies? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. How do we deal with them? Jared's expression darkened. That's the tricky part. Our best guess is that the HOA is using some kind of biological weapon to control them, but we're still trying to figure out the details. He paused, his gaze hardening. All we know is that we need to find a way to neutralize them if we're going to have any chance of success. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Asterisk biological weapons, controlled zombies? Asterisk, it was all too much to process, and she couldn't help but wonder if they were in over their heads. As if sensing her discomfort, Mr. Wilkins squeezed her shoulder, offering her a reassuring smile. Don't worry, Sarah. We're in this together, and we're going to see it through to the end. Before she could respond, a commotion erupted near the entrance, drawing everyone's attention. Jared cursed under his breath, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. What's happening? Sarah asked, her heart racing. Trouble. Jared growled, his eyes fixed on the doorway. Looks like the HOA's goons have found us. Suddenly, the sound of shattering glass echoed through the warehouse, followed by the agonized screams of the resistance fighters. Sarah's blood ran cold as she caught sight of the shambling, rotting figures that surged through the broken windows, their dead eyes fixed on their prey. Zombies, someone shouted, and chaos erupted as the resistance fighters scrambled to defend their stronghold. Sarah felt Mr. Wilkins' hand on her arm, pulling her towards the shadows. We need to find a way out of here, he yelled, his voice laced with urgency. As they fled deeper into the warehouse, Sarah couldn't help but wonder if they had made a terrible mistake in placing their trust in the resistance. With the HOA and the undead horde closing in, their chances of survival had never seemed more bleak. Asterisk, the tension ratchets up as Sarah and Mr. Wilkins find themselves trapped in the Resistance's headquarters, under attack from both the HOA's forces and the controlled zombies. The stakes have never been higher, and the characters must navigate this chaotic and dangerous situation while trying to uncover the full extent of the HOA's sinister plot. The cinematic storytelling and smooth AI narration will keep the audience on the edge of their seats, eager to see how the characters will overcome these seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Asterisk. Chaos reigned supreme within the Resistance's headquarters as the undead horde surged through the broken windows, their gnarled claws grasping for their prey. Gunfire echoed through the dimly lit warehouse, the acrid scent of smoke and blood hanging thick in the air. Sarah clung to Mr. Wilkins as they darted through the maze of crates and debris, their hearts pounding with a desperate need to escape. The sound of the zombies' unearthly howls sent chills down her spine, and she knew that they were running out of time. "We need to find a way out of here, fast," Mr. Wilkins shouted, his voice barely audible over the din of the battle. Sarah scanned the chaotic scene, her mind racing. There has to be another exit, somewhere. Her gaze landed on a partially obscured doorway, and she tugged on Mr. Wilkins' sleeve. "This way," she yelled, leading him towards the potential escape route. They weaved through the throngs of resistance fighters, their progress hampered by the ever-increasing number of zombies. Sarah's heart leaped into her throat as she caught sight of Jared, his face contorted in a grim expression as he unloaded round after round into the undead horde. "Jared," she called out, her voice desperate. "We need to get out of here." The burly security chief glanced in their direction, his eyes widening in alarm. "The back exit," he shouted, gesturing towards the doorway Sarah had spotted. "Get going. We'll hold them off." Sarah didn't need to be told twice. Gripping Mr. Wilkins' hand, she hurled herself towards the door, her pulse pounding in her ears. They burst through the exit and into a dimly lit alley, the sounds of the battle fading behind them. "We need to keep moving," Mr. Wilkins said, his voice low and urgent. "They'll be coming after us." Sarah nodded, her lungs burning as they sprinted down the alley, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. As they rounded a corner, they were met with a sight that made their blood run cold. Shambling towards them, their eyes lifeless and their movements jerky, were the zombified forms of their neighbors, the ones they had once known and trusted. "No," Sarah breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Wilkins gripped her arm, pulling her back. "We need to find another way," he said, his expression grim. They turned and ran, their hearts pounding with each step. The zombies, sensing their prey, let out a chorus of unearthly howls, spurring them on. Sarah's lungs were on fire, her legs threatening to give out, but she refused to slow down. We can't let them catch us. She thought, her mind racing. Not after everything we've been through. Suddenly, a flicker of movement in the shadows caught her eye, and she felt a surge of hope. Could it be? This way. A familiar voice called out, and Sarah recognized the figure of Tyson, the young man who had led them to the Resistance's hideout. Without hesitation, they followed him, weaving through the narrow alleys and hidden passageways. Sarah could feel the weight of the zombies' gaze on them, their relentless pursuit driving them ever onwards. Finally, Tyson led them to a heavy metal door, its surface battered and scarred. "This is it," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Get inside, quickly." Sarah and Mr. Wilkins didn't need to be told twice. They burst through the door, and Tyson slammed it shut behind them, the sound of the zombies' cries echoing in the distance. Gasping for breath, Sarah turned to Tyson, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and wariness. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice shaky. Tyson offered her a weary smile. "Welcome to the last line of defense against the HOA," he replied. "This is our final stronghold." As Sarah and Mr. Wilkins took in their surroundings, a sense of both relief and dread washed over them. They had escaped the Resistance's headquarters, but at what cost? And what new challenges awaited them in this last line of defense? The tension and stakes continued to rise as Sarah and Mr. Wilkins narrowly escaped the Resistance headquarters, only to find themselves confronted by an even more daunting threat: the zombified forms of their own neighbors. The cinematic storytelling and smooth AI narration will keep the audience on the edge of their seats, as the characters must once again navigate a treacherous and unpredictable situation. unsure of whom they can trust. The reveal of a last line of defense against the HOA's sinister plot suggests that the climax of the story is near, leaving the audience eager to discover how the protagonists will overcome these seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Sarah and Mr. Wilkins stood in stunned silence as they took in their new surroundings, the weight of their narrow escape from the Resistance's headquarters still heavy on their minds. The room they found themselves in was a stark contrast to the chaotic, dimly lit warehouse. It was clean, well lit, and exuded an air of order and efficiency. Tyson moved to the center of the room, gesturing towards a large map that dominated the far wall. "This is our command center," he explained, his voice low and serious. "This is where we coordinate our final push against the HOA and their undead army." Sarah felt a pang of unease. Final push. She glanced at Mr. Wilkins, who was studying the map intently, his brow furrowed in concentration. "So, what's the plan?" the older man asked, his voice gruff but tinged with a hint of apprehension. Tyson's expression hardened. "The plan is to hit the HOA headquarters hard and fast, before they have a chance to mobilize their full forces." He pointed to a series of marked locations on the map. "We've been gathering intel and resources for months, and we believe we have a chance to cripple their operation for good." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. This is it, then. The final confrontation. She couldn't help but feel a twinge of doubt, however. Are we really ready for this? As if sensing her unease, Tyson turned to her, his gaze softening. "I know it's a lot to take in, but we don't have a choice. The HOA has to be stopped, no matter the cost." Mr. Wilkins nodded, his expression grim. "I'm with you," he said, his voice resolute. "Whatever it takes." Sarah hesitated, her mind racing. Can we really pull this off? What if we fail? But as she looked into the determined faces of the people around her, she knew that she couldn't back down. Not after everything we've been through. "I'm in," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Tyson offered her a small smile, then turned his attention back to the map. "All right, here's how we're going to do this." As he laid out the details of the plan, Sarah listened intently, her mind working overtime to absorb the information. The assault on the HOA headquarters was to be a coordinated effort, with multiple teams hitting key points simultaneously to overwhelm the enemy's defenses. "The main challenge will be getting past the zombies," Tyson explained, his expression darkening. "We've discovered that they're being controlled by some kind of biological agent, but we hadn't been able to figure out a way to neutralize it." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Biological agents. She couldn't help but wonder just how far the HOA's depravity went. "That's where you two come in," Tyson continued, his gaze fixing on Sarah and Mr. Wilkins. "Your experience with the undead could be the key to our success." Sarah exchanged a glance with Mr. Wilkins, unsure of how to respond. How could we possibly help with that? Before she could voice her concerns, however, a loud alarm blared through the room, startling them all. "What's happening?" Mr. Wilkins demanded, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. Tyson's face paled. "They've found us," he breathed, his voice laced with dread. "The zombies are coming." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat as the sound of unearthly howls reached their ears, growing ever closer. This is it. She thought, her grip tightening on the crowbar. The final battle. "Everyone, to your positions." Tyson shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We need to hold them off until the assault team is ready to move." As the room erupted into a flurry of activity, Sarah and Mr. Wilkins found themselves swept up in the preparation for the impending confrontation. The stakes had never been higher, and the fate of the entire community hung in the balance. The The tension reaches a fever pitch as Sarah and Mr. Wilkins find themselves at the center of the final confrontation against the HOA and their undead army. With the assault on the HOA headquarters imminent, the characters must face their greatest challenge yet, uncertain of their chances of success, but determined to see it through to the end. The cinematic storytelling and smooth AI narration will keep the audience on the edge of their seats, eagerly anticipating the climactic showdown that will determine the fate of the community asterisk. The air was thick with tension as Sarah and Mr. Wilkins took up their positions, the sound of the approaching zombie horde sending a chill down their spines. Around them, the members of the resistance moved with a sense of grim determination, their weapons at the ready. Tyson hurried to Sarah's side, his face etched with a mixture of fear and resolve. "Remember, the key to stopping the zombies is to disrupt the biological agent controlling them," he said, his voice low and urgent. "If we can figure out a way to neutralize it, it might give us the edge we need to take down the HOA." Sarah nodded, her grip tightening on the crowbar. "Easier said than done, she thought, her mind racing. How the hell are we supposed to do that, Suddenly, the ground began to tremble, and the sound of shattering glass filled the air as the first wave of zombies burst through the windows, their gnarled claws reaching for their prey. "Open fire!" Tyson yelled, and the room erupted into a hail of gunfire. Sarah watched in horror as the zombies, undeterred by the onslaught of bullets, continued their relentless advance. She steeled herself, preparing to join the fray, when a familiar face emerged from the chaos. Mrs. Wilkins. The old woman's eyes were lifeless, her movements jerky and unnatural. Sarah felt her stomach twist with a mixture of grief and revulsion. How could this have happened? Before she could react, Mr. Wilkins stepped forward, his revolver held steady. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. He pulled the trigger, and Mrs. Wilkins crumpled to the ground, a bullet hole in her forehead. Sarah felt a lump form in her throat, tears stinging her eyes. This can't be happening, Tyson placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression solemn. "I know it's hard, but we have to keep fighting. For all of them." Sarah glanced around the room, her gaze landing on the determined faces of the resistance fighters. "They're right, she thought, steeling her resolve. "We have to stop this madness, no matter the cost, Gripping the crowbar tightly, she charged into the fray, her mind focused on a single goal: to find a way to disrupt the biological agent controlling the zombies. As she weaved through the chaos, she noticed that the zombies seemed to be drawn to a particular area of the room, their movements more coordinated and focused. That must be where the control center is, she realized, her heart pounding. Dodging a zombie's outstretched claws, she raced towards the epicenter of the horde, her eyes scanning the room for any clues. Suddenly, a glint of metal caught her eye, and she spotted a small device mounted on the wall, its lights blinking in a strange, pulsing pattern. That must be it, she thought, her mind racing. Without hesitation, she swung the crowbar at the device, smashing it into pieces. The effect was immediate. The zombies nearest to her jerked and spasmed, their movements growing erratic and uncoordinated. "It's working," Tyson shouted, his voice triumphant. "Keep going, Sarah." Emboldened, Sarah continued her assault, systematically destroying the control devices scattered throughout the room. The zombies, now disoriented and confused, began to turn on one another, their unearthly howls echoing through the chaos. As the last of the devices was destroyed, the room fell silent, save for the sound of the resistance fighters' heavy breathing. Tyson approached Sarah, a look of awe and gratitude on his face. "You did it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You've given us the chance we needed to take down the HOA." Sarah felt a surge of pride, but it was quickly tempered by the realization of the cost. So, Many lives lost. Asterisk, she thought, her heart heavy. Asterisk, but at least we have a chance to make things right. Asterisk. As the resistance fighters prepared to launch their assault on the HOA headquarters, Sarah and Mr. Wilkins exchanged a solemn look, knowing that the final confrontation was at hand. Asterisk, whatever happens, asterisk, she vowed. Asterisk, we'll see this through to the end. Asterisk. Asterisk, the climactic showdown has arrived, as Sarah and the resistance fighters use their hard-won knowledge to disrupt the HOA's control over the zombie horde, giving them a critical advantage in the final assault on the HOA headquarters. The stakes have never been higher, and the characters must face their greatest challenge yet, driven by a determination to see justice served and the community liberated from the clutches of corruption. The cinematic storytelling and smooth AI narration will keep the audience captivated, eagerly anticipating the outcome of this epic battle for the fate of the neighborhood. Asterisk.